morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That was so beautiful. I love that song so much. My name is Pluto Beirne-Freiman, and I'm your service coordinator this morning. I do public speaking, but I do debate, so that means I speed talk a lot. So if I start rambling, just someone scream at the top of your lungs and I'll stop. Some of you know me and some of you don't. If you do know me, you've probably heard my singing, or maybe you've seen me helping out with spiritual exploration with Tatum. If you don't know me, hi, I'm 14 years old, and I started going to North Universalist Chapel almost 2 years ago when I first moved to Lebanon, New Hampshire. Enough about me. Today, our wonderful Reverend Dr. Dunkley will be blessing us with his reflection. Now, our announcements. There are a lot of exciting things happening at North Chapel every week. Please take some time to read through your order of service and check out all the cool things happening with the congregation. Today, Tatum will be leading spiritual exploration with the kids, without me, so send your condolences. If you are new or visiting North Chapel, we would love if you could sign our guest book in the back, or if you want to stand up and introduce yourself now. Anyone? Okay. Now is the time to put your cell phones in worship mode. And lastly, coffee hour will be held on the front porch outside, and we have snacks and good company. The worship theme for this month is inclusion. I didn't know what the theme would be when I first asked about being service coordinator, but I honestly think it's fitting for me. When I first moved here, I was really scared about fitting in, and to be completely honest, I still am. Fitting in at school, in public, and at church. Especially at church, because I have never really consciously considered myself a very religious or spiritual person. Partly because I never really questioned that side of myself. Until North Chapel, I never really considered church to be something I would choose to go to. My parents took me to church, I would zone out for the sermon, and I got a coffee, and then I went home. But, as my parents will gladly rant to you about, this church is a lot different than my other church. This community has taught me that inclusion doesn't have to mean fitting in. I don't think I fit into this church. Raise your hand if you were 14. But I've realized that that is okay. Despite being the only one of my age and situation, I still feel constantly included by this community. Whether that's being invited to cook pizzas, singing for the congregation, or helping out with the kids downstairs. There hasn't been a moment in this church where I have felt excluded, and I can gratefully say that not all communities have that benefit. I still definitely get worried about fitting in places, but I'm currently on the journey to realize that maybe fitting in isn't a good thing. To truly fit in, I would have to be constantly changing who I am to fit other people's preferences of a person. I would most definitely rather be myself and let others decide whether they'd like to include me or not. The great thing about a true community like this one is that inclusion is the only true option. Is an excluding group of people even deserving of being called a community? And that means whether you're included or not can tell you a lot about who a person or community really is. Community is built on inclusion, and inclusion is built on kindness and trust in one another. I hope you all take pride in the fact that North Chapel is one heck of a community. I've even started to explore other aspects of myself and my relationship with religion because of the inclusion I've felt here. I truly never thought that would happen because until North Chapel, church just was not for me. But every single person in this room has changed that for me, and for many others, even if they don't speak up. Every single person in this room has contributed to this community just by being a part of it, and including others and being included. So I'd like to thank you all for that. Now we can all take a moment of meditation.
Pluto, can I tell you a little story? Have you ever been kayaking?
Yeah.
Okay. The first time I learned how to kayak, I was living in Minnesota. My teacher, gave me this old beat-up oar, and she sat me on the ground, which I won't ask you to. We had driven to the water's edge. I was so excited to get on the water for the first time, but before we unlashed the boats from the roof racks of our cars, my teacher sat me down on the ground with this oar and taught me how to draw even circles in the sand, half circles on either side. And then once I had done that, he taught me how to draw uneven circles on either side. Wide on the right, shallow on the left, wide on the left, shallow on the right. It was weird, but in time I realized that it was really helpful. How old are you now? You say 14? Okay, so about the kayak that I was using about 14 years ago was well suited for my body. It's the kayak that I still have now. It's still well suited for my body, which is important because when you row, you use all parts of your body. You use your arms and your chest and your core and your hips and your back and your feet and your spirit and everything. It's a whole body experience. So drawing even circles on the ground teaches your body how to keep your mind moving the boat forward in the water, if that makes sense. And drawing uneven circles in part helps your body know how to turn. Okay, you don't have to stand up. It's easier to do that on the ground than it is in the boat. It's easier to do with your body than it is to talk about it. These are good things to know because it's such a bummer to not be in control of where you're going on the water. And it's a bummer to get yourself stuck in the mud in the shallows on the shoreline, or to dead end yourself in the water weeds or the elephant grasses. It's way better to know how to get around. After we practiced on the ground, we unlashed the boats and we tried it in the water. It was beautiful there where I first learned how to kayak. I spent a lot of time on the water in Minnesota and then spent a lot of time on the water in Maryland. After I left St. Paul, I paddled at Bladensburg Waterfront Park and I paddled on the Potomac inlets quite a bit. It's beautiful there too. I also kayaked in New Jersey between my time in Minnesota and Maryland, not quite as beautiful. I used to paddle about 200 yards east of Route 9, Highway 9, the one that Bruce Springsteen wrote the song about in 1975. The song was called Born to Run, and I was 10 when it was written. I learned to sing the song in high school. In the day, we sweated out on the streets of a runaway American dream. And at night, we ride through mansions of glory and suicide machines sprung from cages on Highway 9, chrome-wheeled, fuel-injected, and stepping out over the line. Baby, this town rips the bones from your back. You gotta get out while you're young. So Bruce Springsteen was 26 in 1975. He's 75 years old now. His birthday is coming up in September. Springsteen wrote this song when there were still race riots on the streets of New Jersey, when people who were different didn't always tend to get along so well. So when Bruce decided to befriend his Clarence Thomas, who was Clarence, I did that in the writing too. When he decided to befriend Clarence Clemens, who was his saxophone player, that is a strange image, I gotta say. You know how hard this is, Neil. Okay, so I'm gonna rewind in my mind. So when Bruce decided to befriend Clarence Clemens, who was a saxophone player, When changes were made uptown and the big man joined the band, as they say, it was a statement. When they demonstrated their affection for one another, their friendship, when they depicted it on the cover of the album. However tentatively. It was a statement. It was a heartfelt declaration proclaiming a better way. It was a little revolutionary. It was a little joyful revolution. We were deadlocked then. We were stuck and we needed to break beyond ourselves. So we revved our engines and we sprung ourselves free from cages on Highway 9. We had to find some way to do it. We broke free, a lot of us did. It sprung a lot of us out from the cages, out from the places where we had been imprisoned. And we've been revving our engines and springing ourselves from cages ever since. By the time I was kayaking in New Jersey, I'd been singing Born to Run for decades. It was then, and it is still now, an anthem for me and my friends. It's a sacred song in New Jersey, maybe for some of us here in this room. It's hit or miss in the Upper Valley. But it's sure a sure thing in Jersey. There aren't race riots there anymore. Parts of Jersey are still like to pretend that the streets are rougher than they actually are, but they are still rough. Parts of New Jersey are really loud, and Highway 9 is almost always busy. But just 200 yards away, you can still put your kayak in the water at sunrise on Lake Toponimus. Toponimus is a Lenape word. It's an indigenous word meaning elk drinking from a cold stream, according to local sources, but who knows. Anyway, even with engines roaring in the background, you can still put in at Toponimus and have yourself a reverent experience. You can still put in and head straight out into the water in the darkness before daybreak, even circles. And you can still come about and turn around and find your stillness at the sunrise. And I'll tell you where I'd really like to kayak is in Walden Pond. I have a mystical memory about being there, iconic memory. I find Walden Pond to be a magical place, the home of miracles, little minor miracles. Nowadays, Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts, there's a statue, a life-size man standing in front of the restoration of a tiny house from the 19th century. It's a tiny little house that has been recently rebuilt according to the codes of the time. The advantages and the limitations of the woods, the milling processes, the building materials and their availability, the tools, and the know-how of the time. It's beautiful. It's transcendent. And who is honored by this statue? To whom does this house belong? I would argue that it belongs to all of us. I would assert and argue fervently that this house is our inheritance. And at least spiritually speaking, I would be correct in my assertion, compelling in my spiritual argument. And yet, were any one of us moved to secretly occupy, quietly reclaim, or in any way take possession of this tiny little house at sunset, it would not be the spiritual police who would come and arrest us on sight before the sunrise. The state police would act swiftly and decisively. And they would be right, for it is more correct and more compelling to say that this house belongs not to all of us, even though historically speaking, it belonged to a Unitarian named Henry David Thoreau. Most certainly one of us. Rather, it is more correct and more compelling to say that this old house belongs to all of us. Not all of us, but to all of us. This tiny little house used to belong to Henry David Thoreau, and he is the one who is honored by the statue that stands in front of it. As I say, this house belonged to Henry David Thoreau, thinking like any logical thinking person does. Of course I'm right. Right in the narrow narrative sense, right in the legal sense, and yet this house belongs to us as well, all of us. even though neither you nor I took pains to build this house, even though neither you nor I hold the deeds of possession or ownership. Neither you nor I can enter into this abode with a satchel of our belongings and a valid expectation to enjoy our stay for very long. We would be removed, arrested, detained, fined, even though this house belongs to us. Obviously, the physical house of wood and stone does not legally belong to all of us. It does not rightfully belong to all of us, as it were. It is the metaphysical house that we possess, not in Concord, Massachusetts, but right here in our hearts. It is the metaphysical house that has not been recently rebuilt according to 19th century standards, thank God. Not rebuilt according to the advantages and limitations of woods and milling processes, of building materials and their availability, of 19th century tools and the know-how of the time. Our tiny house, our tiny little house, our tiny little metaphysical house is made of blood and bone. This is where we learn and live and love life right out loud. This is where we have lived and have learned and have loved life right out loud, and inshallah, God willing, this is where we will live and where we will learn and where we will love life right out loud, l'chaim. Poet Janice Ian reminds us, she writes, "As I have lived in houses and I have lived in homes, eaten off of tables made of wood and stone through the trials and tribulations, I've never known how to say I love you and let my feelings show." We still struggle with this. It's hard to let our feelings show. Janice Ian continues, she writes, "So thank you for the music and thank you for the song, and bless you for the freedom of knowing right from wrong. Thank you for the laughter, the heartache, and the tears. It's a blessing to grow, and it's a goodness to be here." The tiny little house that sustains the soul is living right here within us. This house is beautiful and transcendent. If anyone, however well-meaning, were to try to enter this house at sunset with a satchel of their belongings and an expectation to stay, the spiritual police would act quickly and decisively. They too would be arrested on sight, if I could manage being that civil and polite. Assuming, of course, that I noticed that they were there. Most of the time, people like you and me don't notice when people come to stay in our spiritual houses. We rarely know that we've been occupied. When unwanted guests are living in our tiny little metaphysical house, our spiritual houses, the home of the soul, the only real and meaningful home of the soul, sometimes we don't know that they're there. Sure, we go to churches. We go to fellowship halls and meeting houses. We go to synagogues and to mosques. We go to Walden Pond and with appropriate reverence, and we go with a special kind of reverence, as if Walden Pond were somehow more profound and more transcendent than other places, more so than Silver Lake, for instance, even though it's not. We go to these places, but not in the same way that we go to a hardware store or a farmer's market, not in the same way that we go to a library or an auto mechanic. Going to the hardware store or to the farmer's market is a transcendent experience. Going to the library or to the auto mechanic is a transactional experience. It's an exchange. It's either to purchase or to loan with the promise of return. Either we buy or we borrow. We purchase when we go to the hardware store or to the farmer's market. We promise when we go to the library, and we borrow and return. We borrow books and the library loans. It's an intentional, non-purchase experience, but it's still transactional. It's still an exchange. If you're like me, though, you pray when you go to the auto mechanic. Either at home or right there in the garage in the waiting area. And while it's true that this isn't a transactional experience, it's also true that we as congregants do not get our cars back because we have prayed for them. We get our cars back when we, as clients, not as congregants, pay for the services that have been rendered, when we pay them for what they did. In the same way, it's the same way with carpenters and with roofers, and it's the same way with electricians and IT people. It is the same way with painters and with plumbers. It's always transactional. That's why we call these things the trades. When we go to churches, fellowship halls, and meeting houses, when we go to synagogues and to mosques, or to Walden Pond for that matter, it is not transactional. We're not buying anything. We're not purchasing anything, and I believe that we may not fully realize this, especially when it comes to receiving the good news, especially when it comes to taking it all in. And it's so clearly seen in the agnostics and the skeptics and the doubters, of which I am certainly one. Upon hearing the word of Jesus, for instance, we will promptly say, I'm not buying that, without irony. And if I were to respond as a minister, no sir, no ma'am, you most certainly are not buying this. In fact, you cannot buy it in any meaningful way. No one can. They might not understand what I was saying. They might even think that I was agreeing with them. When we go to churches and fellowship halls and meeting houses, when we go to synagogues or mosques or Walden Pond, we bring with us precisely what we think we need to take away. When we think otherwise, we fall into little traps, cages from which we need to be sprung free. A poet writes, "You will go, and until you know, I'll be right there by your side. And even then, whisper the wind, and she will carry up your ride. I hear all the people of the world in one bird's lonely cry, and I see them trying every way they know how to make their spirit fly." Ricky Lee Jones writes these words in a song called "The Horse." She raises the question that is before us this morning: how shall we make our spirits fly? She writes, "We will fly way up high, where the cold wind blows, or in the sun, laughing, having fun with all the people that she knows. And if the situation should keep us separated, we know the world won't fall apart, and you will free the beautiful bird that's caught inside your heart." Something is trapping us, and we find ourselves deadlocked and stuck in places where we don't want to stay. Years ago, I remember when Cornell West recognized that the top 20% were doing very well. The top 1% euphoric, but 80% of fellow citizens are fearful of downward mobility, dealing with stagnation and declining wages. More and more Americans see the top 1% of the population owns 48% of the wealth. The top 10% owns 86% of the wealth. The top 20% owns 94% of the wealth. And they say, how can 80% of the people struggle over 6% of the resources without being at each other's throats? His was a keen observation back in the day, back in '96. Speaking in a rally in Texas Speaking at a rally in Texas, a man named James Tallarico said it again. He said, "The only minority destroying America these days is the billionaires." Did you hear this quote? He says, trans people are 1% of the population. Muslims are 1% of the population. Undocumented people are 1% of the population. We're focused on the wrong 1%. He said trans people aren't taking away our health care, Muslims aren't defunding schools, immigrants aren't cutting taxes for themselves and for their rich friends. It's billionaires, and I'm sorry if I'm offending any billionaires in the congregation. It's billionaires and their puppet, I actually mean that. It's billionaires and their puppet politicians. The culture war is a smokescreen. I share this morning in a religious way, because when we think about what inclusion means, and we think about it only in the objectives measures that are given to us by the billionaire mentality, we end up thinking that it's meaningful to befriend people with whom we are not in conflict. We build bridges between people who are both standing on the same piece of land. We imagine that we are more different than we are. And we don't need to. We need to be in touch with ourselves and get rid of that energy that is occupying our spiritual house, telling us to believe things that we do not believe. So I return, and I'll leave you with this final quote from Henry David Thoreau. When you find yourself locked, remember what he said all those years ago. He said, "I went to the woods because I wanted to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I do not wish to live that which is not life, living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deeply, to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdy and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad path and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish that meanness to the world. If we share what it is that's in our heart, if we live deep and recognize our humanity with one another, we can overcome even the most egregious of human errors as they unfold here at home, as they unfold in Israel and Gaza, as they unfold within our hearts. The big question is, are we willing to break out of the cage? Are we willing to not be deadlocked by the conflicts that define us? Are we that brave? I think we are that brave. May it be so. Let us be careful to see with our own eyes. Let us be careful to read the signs of the world with our own minds, our own souls. On the cover of the order of service, there's a dead-end sign on a wide-open road. Let's make sure we pay attention to all of the signs that we see, not simply the ones that we're given. May it be so. Blessed be and amen.